Right. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining the Matriots tonight. This is an amazing grid of women, and it makes me think about our candidate grid, and then to see a member grid in somewhat of a similar way to the candidate grid that you see on so many of our publications is just really amazing to think about how those networks work together. So I'm Elissa Schneider, and today we're going to share a little bit about how the Matriots delivered in 2020 and give you a little bit more political backstory and some data to go with it about how things went on November 3rd and just a little bit more background to that. There'll be further information as we dive into 2021 as we get official results. As you know, many boards of elections are sharing unofficial results and are looking to certify their canvases in the next day or two. So everything I'll share today will be based on those unofficial results, but from those, almost all, there's a few races that are still too close to call, but much of what we talk about today will certainly hold into the next month or two as final official results come through. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with everyone. All right. Can everyone see my screen? It says Matriots General Insider Debrief.
Yeah.
Great. So first of all, before we get into the nitty and gritty, since this is officially a Matriots member-only happy hour, I'd like to start with a toast for anyone who has a cup of coffee or a glass of wine or a cocktail with you. And I just would like to start with the toast to all the women that ran in 2020.
You're here.
You're here. Cheers.
Cheers.
All right. Let me. Give me 1 second here to move y'all over. All right. First thing I want to talk about is Matrix success. Let's start with the wins and we'll continue to keep moving through there. So in 2020, 64 candidates were endorsed in the general election. You can see all of their photos right there. 35 of those candidates are well ahead and winning, and most of those have already effectively won their race. We have 4 candidates who are in races too close to call. We'll continue to watch those, of course. For much of what I talk about as far as winning percentages and things like that, right now, I'm hoping that all those too close to calls, that a Matrix candidate wins all of those races. And that would put us at a 59% win ratio for 2020. And another, I think, really fun, interesting fact to share. So on November 3, on election day, there were 7,248,589 votes for Matriot candidates. So those 64 women garnered 7.25 million votes. Really, really huge when you think about the impact of the Matriots statewide. I can also tell you that the number of votes against those same candidates was much less than 7.2 million. So I think when you think about the collective of what we're doing here, it's really exciting to see. All right, moving on. Next slide. One of the things that really struck me when I was going through on election day and looking at one county over another's results was that many of the candidates that we endorsed in 2018 won. That's not too much of a surprise. What was really exciting to see is that most of those candidates are winning by higher percentages than in 2016, and higher percentages than 2018 and higher percentages in 2020. And the vote counts are higher as well. And what this is really saying, and in particular in the Ohio House, which runs every 2 years, those candidates are really being, it's a stamp of approval from the voters that these are women who are really holding their own in their seats. And in particular, this is really impressive with the 4 candidates who in 2018, the Matriots endorsed and won by very small margins in 2018, came back in 2020 and were won by much, much higher margins. And those are Mary Lightbody, Ohio House in Central Ohio, Beth Liston, Central Ohio as well, and Allison Russo in Central Ohio. And then in the greater Cincinnati area and the suburbs, Jessica Miranda. Very exciting. Jessica ran her second time, won in 2018 with the help of the Matriots, won by 56 votes. And she's won in 2020 by much more of that. And it speaks to the good work that's happening in the Ohio General Assembly over the last 2 years. There are also a number of other candidates that I don't have their photos here, but I want to shout out to as well, who resoundingly won in 2018 and 20 that were Matriot endorsed in both those years. That's Kristen Boggs, Erica Crowley, Bridget Kelly, and Tavia Golansky. So very exciting to see all of those Matriots in the Ohio General Assembly continuing in 2020. Before I dig even more into the wins, and I have a lot more to say about some of the amazing candidates that won, I wanted to take a minute and ground us in the fact that win or lose, our candidates are delivering. And, you know, one of the things that I know is very important to many of the Matriot members on here today, and those not on here, is civil political discourse. And our candidates, you know, on election day, as you know, I'm sure all of us were scrolling through our Facebook feeds, and I happen to follow every single one of the Matriot candidates, and one after another, whether they won or lost. And I just pulled a quick snapshot of 2 of those here. But win or lose, their responses were measured, respectful, and kind. And I'm just continuously impressed by the civil discourse of our candidates. And specifically, I wanted to just read right off of Christian Johnson, who ran for Ohio Senate and who did not win, had this to say: the voting results read differently than what we had hoped, but what they will not tell us is that we did not win. We showed up every day of this campaign. We gave people a choice and a voice. We did more with less. Oh, we won. Thank you, thank you. And so Christian's response is much like many, many of our candidates. And, you know, in a year where much of the conversation has not been as civil, and we've all been a little exhausted by what's happening politically, we understand that value of diplomacy in elections, and our candidates continue to deliver on that. And just an example of the kind of information that you've seen from the Matriots, these are some of our social icons for each of our candidates, and their understanding of civil political discourse, I think, continues before elections start, right in the meat of it, when things get really, really tough, and then even after a loss. One of the things that really spoke to me in the election results and continuously kept jumping out was the leadership of women at the county level. And I think this is something that we often overlook, particularly when the state house may be on our mind and national politics are on our mind. And the no names that you sort of know, and the brand names are sort of what gets the most news and play. But as I was looking at those results, one thing that kept popping up in particular in many of our candidates that have run in the largest counties, they're outperforming the presidential candidates as far as the number of votes, or they're getting very, very close. And I think sometimes when we talk about the leadership in politics, a lot of these names don't come up, and they should be, because women are truly leading. Kristen Scalise, who's here in the American flag in the large screen, Kristen is the Summit County Fiscal Officer, was reelected. She was in Summit County the single highest vote getter in the whole county, and that's above both presidential candidates, number one. And I think often when we think about our leaders and who's beloved in communities, we're not necessarily thinking at the county level. And there are no men who are beating Kristen and many of these other women at the countywide level. These women have tremendous support. Also in Summit County, Eileen Shapiro also outperformed both political candidates at the presidential level. So she got more votes than Biden or Trump. Sandra Kurtz, Summit County Clerk of Courts, nearly outperformed the presidential candidates. And then in Franklin County Clerk of Courts, Mary Ellen O'Shaughnessy, was the second highest vote getter after Joe Biden in Franklin County. And then right after her was Cheryl Brooks Sullivan, the treasurer in Franklin County, both of which were reelected, of course, with those kind of numbers. And then lastly, in Hamilton County, Denise Driehaus was the second highest vote getter right after Joe Biden. So just tremendous outpouring of support for women at the county level that we often take for granted. And I think people often think of potentially other men's names as being the real leaders and the most popular candidates at the county level. This is also very exciting. In 2021, 2 county commissions will be led by all women, all Matriot teams. So most county commissions in Ohio have 3 county commissioners that govern the whole county. And in Montgomery County, on November 3rd, Debbie Lieberman and Judy Dodge were reelected and join Carolyn Rice, who is a class of 2018 Matriots candidate, wasn't on the ballot this time. And so now we have a all-woman Matriot team leading Montgomery County, which is just so special. And similarly in Hamilton County, so this is a full shout out to our friends in Southwest Ohio, Alicia Reese and Denise Driehaus were elected on November 3, and they joined Matriots class of 2018 candidate Stephanie Summerow Dumas. So just really, really exciting. And another example, frankly, also of the growing influence of the Matriots pipeline. So year after year after year, as we were building more and more women who all can effectively affect change together. And I know, a good example of that, Carolyn Rice often talks about her ability to be able to call on other Matriot endorsed women who are in elected office, not just at the county level, but at the state house level as well, and ask what could be considered sometimes a dumb question and be able to have the respect of her peers at the state house. Another exciting win for the Matriots sheriff. So I think it comes as a surprise to none of us that the percentage of women who lead at the county sheriff level is very low in the state of Ohio and nationally as well. So in 2020, there is 1 woman sheriff. in the state. And in 2021, 2 more Matriots women will be joining those ranks. So congratulations to Hamilton County Sheriff-elect Charmaine McGuffey and Summit County Sheriff-elect Candy Fathery. And both of these races, I think, are very real examples of women who face harassment and discrimination in the workplace. And, you know, one of the things that I'm reminded of as I was preparing this slide is Candy and I had a conversation not too long ago about, you know, how difficult it was for her running against who is her boss, right? So she was working this year for her boss, running for office. So going into work, having to work for her boss that she is literally running for office against. And so the tremendous courage that it took for both Charmaine and Candy to run for office it just can't be understated. This is also, these 2 candidates are great examples of the Matriots getting involved early in a campaign. We endorsed both Charmaine and Candy in the primary, where they were challenged, no surprise, by men from within their own party. And this is a great example of, we got all the way to the finish line, but this took significantly supporting both these women in the primary and then again in the general. And so, it's just a beautiful testament to what your Matriot member money is doing and how we're affecting change as a group, because these are 2 very difficult races, and also personally very difficult for these women to run in these seats. So just wildly exciting to see the change that they're going to be able to affect in Summit and Hamilton County. Similarly, another area where in politics, often the most competitive seats are open seats. So you often, you know, if someone's running, has to run against an incumbent, many years, no one may step up to run for office against an incumbent. But when an open seat comes up, suddenly it starts to look a little more attractive to everyone. Often what happens in politics is that when they think about, oh, who's the best person to compete for this competitive open seat, often our minds go directly to a strong male candidate, right? Someone that we think of in the community who can quote unquote raise money and do the work and is quote unquote qualified. And so women running open seats is important to continuing to change that narrative and really lean into the fact that women can get elected and can compete for competitive seats, not just seats where nobody thinks someone's going to win, and not just seats that are definitely going to be a win, right? That there are women out there who are supremely qualified and capable of running a solid campaign. And here are 5 examples of that. Again, you'll see Candy and Charmaine, who ran for open seats. And then also joined by Alicia Reese, who is the commissioner-elect in Hamilton County, Veronica Sims. And Veronica Sims is a beautiful example as well of a Matriots candidate who ran. Veronica was in the class of 2019, you may have remembered, and she lost her race in 2019, came back again, ran for a different seat, came back and asked for the Matriots endorsement a second time, went through the endorsement process, was granted endorsement into the class of 2020 as well, and then won this seat. What this pipeline is going to take for us to really get to 50% women in Ohio elected office is women coming back and having the grit and determination to run again. And so I just applaud Veronica Sims, who is our county council member, District 10 in Summit County. And also Jill Schiller, who is treasurer-elect in Hamilton County, won an open seat as well. So again, something that isn't always talked about when folks talk about who wins what race, but with political insiders, this really is important to that narrative. Similar similarly, also difficult and in a different way than running for an open seat is running against an incumbent. It is statistically, in politics, one of the most difficult things to do is to beat an incumbent candidate. And I'm sure many of you know this. And, you know, one of the often quoted percentages is 10% of the time incumbents lose. It is very difficult to beat an incumbent candidate. And this year, again, Matrix candidates punching above their weight, well above the 10%. 18% of our candidates who ran against incumbents won. It's a very good number. That number could go up depending on a few of the races that are too close to call right now. And so congratulations to Judge-elect Jennifer Bruner for Ohio Supreme Court. Rita Darrow in Summit County, running for county council there. Nikki Frenchco, commissioner-elect in Trumbull County, and Monique Smith, who will join the team in the Ohio House. Speaking of the Ohio House, this is very exciting. You may remember the Matriots' first year competing and engaging in elections was 2018. And that year, the percentage of women in the Ohio General Assembly, which is, of course, Ohio House and Ohio Senate put together is our Ohio General Assembly, was an all-time high of 27.3 when that General Assembly went in on January 1 of 2019. On January 1 of 2021, when the 134th General Assembly assembles, it will be 31.8% women. Huge. And you know, what really excites me about this as well is, you know, what we know from research is that the number's been pretty flat in the Ohio General Assembly, hovering around 25, 26% for many, many, many years, for really almost 20, 25, 30 years. And in 2016, things started to inch up a little bit. We inched up a little bit more in 2018, and now in 2020, inching up again. And so the fact that we're on a step-by-step move here is very exciting for getting to that 50%. You know, when I think about getting to 50% in the Ohio General Assembly, one of the things that I often think about is the tipping point concept. And I don't know exactly what that percentage is. There's not a whole lot of really good research and not a whole lot of examples of states that have hit 50% in the Ohio General Assembly. But it excites me if we can continue to inch up into the 40%. I really do believe that well after that, we're going to very quickly fall over that 50%. It again is going to take a couple more elections, but very, very exciting to me. And I hope that that energy and momentum that is slowly happening is encouraging to those who want to run in 2022. So Ohio General Assembly, Ohio House candidates will be up in 22, and half of the Ohio Senate will be up again in 22. So stay tuned. Specifically within the upcoming General Assembly at the State House, again, we have a couple of candidates you'll see starred here where we're still waiting to see the outcome of those elections. But we will potentially have 18 Matriot endorsed candidates at the state legislature. And to me, that's wildly exciting about affecting change and really leaning into Matriot values. Specifically also, just to give you a little bit of background as well, the split of Republican and Democratic women at the State House is nearly the same. And again, depending on a couple of those races, but it is almost split. I think that also really speaks to the nonpartisan nature and the real possibility for women working together to move things forward at the State House. That I think we all could agree needs more women influence on both sides of the aisle. So onward to 2021, over the last 3 election cycles that the Matriots have been active, we've endorsed 161 candidates. And within that, you heard me talk a little bit about some of the candidates who ran and ran again and won. Of these 3 grids of women who ran in 18, 19, and 20, there's 16 women who ran in 2 out of 3 of the years. And I think that speaks to, and some of them have lost in 2 of those years. And I think it really does speak to the pipeline that we're building together and the network of women who have run and done the very difficult thing. And so I just, to all these women, but especially to the women who have run more than once, I think we should take a moment to applaud their, determination and grit and ambition. And I think that those are all important things that are going to be necessary to really break that barrier and get more women in Ohio elected office. So, thinking about the next grid in 2021, the Matriots will continue to endorse candidates at lower levels of office. And this is just a listing of everything that's going to be on the ballot in 2021. This is often called off years, you'll hear, where these are races that aren't quite as big. But they play a tremendous impact in all of our day-to-day life and are so important to building that pipeline of strong women who can run for bigger, more important seats as well. And so the Matriots are already hard at work strategizing and planning for 2021 and the endorsement process. That will all be live with all the details in January of 2021. So please encourage anyone you know. I think we all know it takes 7 times of being asked before a woman is ready to step up. And so I just encourage you to think about who who makes sense to run for one of those seats in 2021. So ultimately, all of this that I very quickly rolled right through speaks to, the fact that she can't do this without you, and we can't do this without you. What's been accomplished in 3 short election cycles is huge, but this is also a long game about building a strong network of women and a strong network of women and men who support women's representation and honor the fact that it truly is difficult for a woman to run for office and to be on that soapbox. So before I take questions, let's raise our glass, this time not to the candidates, but to all of you who made all of this possible. Cheers. And of course, one final slide before I take the questions, but we are looking in 2021 to endorse upwards of 200 women. This is no small feat. Again, tell a woman you know to seek our endorsement. To make all this happen takes money. To support those candidates with the checks they need and deserve also takes money and support. And so if you can help connect us to other women and men who would like to join the network, host at least virtual to start in 2020, host a house party, and continue to spread the word and share with others to support us. Okay, so I see all kinds of flashes on the chat here.
Lots
Shiloh,
and lots and lots of cheerleading, Elissa. Lots of atta girls, lots of let's do more of that. I did pull several questions out. If you've got others, we can post them, but do you want me to read you a couple questions from earlier on?
Yeah, why don't you read me a couple questions, and then we'll give people an opportunity to jump off mute if their question isn't answered in this batch. How's that sound?
Yeah,
Good?
great. So Shar was asking, how do these women who are coming back to run a second or a third time describe that first experience? Have they shared that with you?
Yeah, one of the examples of that comes to mind is Sarah Bitter, and I don't think Sarah would mind me sharing this. Sarah ran in 2018 for Ohio Senate, ran for Ohio House in 2020, and did not win either time, although I will tell you that her vote share, she's continuously outperformed every other candidate who's run from her party in that seat. So wildly impressive. But in 2018, after the election, one of the conversations that Sarah and I had was, Sarah said, she said, Elissa, I only felt like I really knew what I was doing in late September. In late September, I thought, good Lord, I am cooking with grease. And if I could have been able to do this, and to know more in June or July, I think about how much more I could have accomplished if I had more time, right? Because campaigns are this pressure cooker of time. And so that's one example that comes to mind. And, another thing along those lines, Shar, that I think of is, I call the candidates win or lose the day after the election and talk about how proud the Matriots were to support their campaign, regardless of the outcome. And we're so grateful that they gave us that opportunity. And one of the things I say is, I hope you run again, but I will not ask you this question today. Take some time and think about it. And this year, several first-time candidates said, oh, you can ask me the question right now. I'm going to run again. And many women need the time to really think about it because they're so totally drained. But boy, I was just shocked this year by how many women that quickly answered that question and were like, oh, I'm coming back. And so it's just so encouraging to hear. But I think a lot of candidates really do learn a lot in those first years. And that also reminds me of one of the things we did this year. And of course, Zoom actually makes this a little bit more possible for candidates across the state. So our Matriot candidates, we held peer-to-peer conversations. And the point of those peer-to-peer conversations were simply just for them to be able to give each other advice, right? I mean, I could put together some PowerPoint presentation on running a campaign or something like that. But the truth is, one, these women know what they're doing inherently. And two, they learn best. And our absolute experts here are the women who have run before. And so when I talk about the beauty in that pipeline, that's what I think of.
Here is a question from Laurel, who is trying to help take one of those actions that you suggested, which is to encourage a woman to run. What is the minimum age in Ohio to run for these offices?
So many of them don't have a minimum. I mean, you've got to be 18, you've got to be of voting age to run for anything. But beyond that, many of these seats do not have a minimum age. There are people as young as 18 and 19 who have run for school board and won in this state. And so age is often not a requirement. Again, and in particular, what's a little tricky with especially the races next year is there is some Ohio revised code that warrants specific things and specific qualifications, in particular things like engineer or coroner often come with additional sort of resume skills. But many of these seats do not. And many of those rules are made up municipality by municipality because they do have the power to be able to do that.
Okay.
So run, Laurel. I don't know where you are.
Niece too. Apparently she has a niece that should be serving. Oh, okay. And so a great start.
Yeah, I'm too.
Oh, there you are. I see you now.
I don't have the energy like all these young women do. I'm sure a lot of the older ones have a lot more energy than I do too, so I'll let
Yeah.
my niece do all the work.
Run, Laurel, and support her.
Yes.
I will.
Here's one from Tari, who is asking about gerrymandering. When you
Mhm.
look across these results and you think about the wins and losses and the margins, what's the role gerrymandering's playing there? The way that she's really writing it is gerrymandering's making some of this impossible. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I think that 2022 brings us a new map. That much we're certain of. What exactly that map looks like, and but demographically, based on what's happening, I think you are going to see some districts that look quite a bit different than they did in 2020. And I do think about those women who have run again and again, and what a district might look like demographically for that candidate. And that, of course, depends on which party a candidate's running for. But 2022, we get a new map, and there are new opportunities for women who live in different districts. That we just don't know which ones will really be in play. And of course, there's lots of thought about that, especially at the congressional level. But from a Matriots perspective, yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunity as a new map happens for women to run and women to compete differently based on those demographics.
Okay. We've got several questions wondering if there are Matriots similar PACs in other states. And I know a lot of landscape research was done back in 2017 before we got going. Are we unique? Are we in duplication somewhere?
Yeah, I think there's a couple. I think there's one in Minnesota. There's women winning and winning women. There's several versions of that. There's a lot of similarly named ones. There are a few that I think play some parallels to what the Matriots are doing. Some of them don't lean into the nonpartisan nature as much as the Matriots do, which I think makes us so much more special, in my opinion, and can affect more change, especially in a state like Ohio. There are also, one of the things that also really came up in that kind of research was there's a lot of groups, and you're seeing even more of this happening, that are specifically aimed at training. So a lot of training and sort of onboarding and encouragement of women to run for office, the Ignites, the She Should Runs, those types of groups. There are lots of those in the state of Ohio and then nationally as well. And so that's specifically one of the reasons that the Matriots decided to really lean into that PAC lane and really lean into how we could affect change for the women on the office. Not that the rest of it doesn't need to be done. All this pipeline and us ultimately getting to 50% women in Ohio elected office is going to take multiple organizations doing lots of really great work. And so I'm so grateful for the differences actually that exist between those groups.
Yeah. Elissa, I know at this time of year, the endorsement committee kind of gets together and looks at the work, right? And kind of says, what did we learn? How do we do this better next year? So Jody Melfi is asking a question along those lines. She lives in Licking County, where of course there all of a sudden was a race for Larry Householder's seat that sprung up outside of our July 4th announcement of our total class of 64, right? So are we thinking about how we participate in those strange opportunities that may pop up from time to time?
We're continuously working on improving that process, and also I think year by year we're also working to increase our capacity of what's possible. So we are a small and mighty committee and a small and mighty staff that make this happen, and so we're very careful about the capacity because we're very serious about the candidates that we endorse. We want to make sure that we're in real communication with those candidates, not simply a questionnaire and then we stop thinking about it. There's very thoughtful deliberation in that process. And so part of getting at those opportunities is making sure that we have the capacity to continue to open and close the process. And so that's something that we're certainly talking about for 2021 to make sure that that process happens. And 2021 is a year where there are like 9 different filing deadlines throughout the year. And so you may remember in 21 versus 2020 that we added candidates as we were going along, and it's likely in 2021 that the process will look something like that.
Final question as far as what I've got posted here so far. What was the makeup in terms of party of this year's class?
Of the Matriots endorsed candidates?
Yeah.
So we endorsed 67 candidates all told, counting the primary. So a lot of what I talked about today were the 64 candidates that ultimately competed in the general election. Out of the 67 candidates, 3 of those candidates were Republicans and the rest were Democrats this year. And again, that's another commitment that the endorsement committee continues to lean into endorsing as many candidates as possible from all sides of the aisle. And the opportunity in 2019, almost all, nearly, not all, but nearly all the races this year were partisan races where you see somebody's, if they're an R or a D on the ballot. Next year, there are some partisan races, but many of them are nonpartisan. And in 2019, we also endorsed a number of independents that didn't happen this year, again, based on the nature of the races. But I expect that to also significantly increase going into 2021.
I'm going to see if Emily Toby is in a position to come off mute. I'm going to read her question, but there you are.
Hi.
Okay, great.
Yeah, no, I was just curious. So going into like an off-year election, we should have a lot more local candidates. So city, school, mayoral races. I'm assuming we'll be endorsing many more candidates. And I'm just curious if there are any specific strategies or information you can share, given it will be sort of an off-year election.
Yeah, so you're right. There are potentially, and even getting at the exact number is very difficult because some seats have 3 up 1 year, 4 up 1 year, that kind of thing for group city councils. But there could be upwards of 6, 7, 8,000 races on the ballot. That's because we have, thousands of villages in this state and hundreds and hundreds of townships, which have many trustees, right? And so it is a different year. Our endorsement process looks often quite a bit the same as far as the thoughtful questions that we're asking, but the perspectives of these women who are running in more local races are much more tied, not to macro issues, but much more to what's going on in their individual communities. And so from our perspective, I know for the endorsement committee, it is, those conversations do change a little bit. And we are looking at how we manage our capacity, because we do like to spend that time, even with local candidates, to be able to get to a point of endorsing upwards of 200 women. Another piece of that that's on my mind from a strategy perspective as well is making sure that these women know about those opportunities, particularly at a lower level. You won't see next year a whole lot of endorsements in the way that, you might see Nancy Larson here. Nancy Larson put out lists at, 5, 6, 10, 12, 18 different endorsements that she received this year. And a candidate for school board is typically there are very few options for them for endorsement because a lot of organizations don't engage at that low of level. And so part of what I think is exciting about what we're doing is, one, boy, the endorsement and the money and the support mean a whole lot more because it's not coming from that many places. And two, a lot of these candidates don't know the process for endorsement or what that looks like. You know, when I reached out in 2019 to candidates who might have been running for school board, who are running for the first time, you know, sometimes I would get back a response of, do I need to pay you money? And I'm like, no, this is the opposite of that. We're here to support you. We'd like you to consider filling out our application for endorsement. And so those candidates do need a different set of strategies and a different set of help. But what this does, endorsing at this level, is also helping train these women about what endorsement might look like. And I think that that's very exciting. And also it's just this further stamp of approval that doesn't happen. And so to give those women the reinforcement that they're worthy and that it's important that they're running for this and that's worthy of support, financial and otherwise, I think it's always important, but in those races, it really feels just that much more special.
Another strategy question from Melissa Cass. Where do we stand on judicial endorsements?
So the board of directors will have that conversation. That will be candidate eligibility for 2021, and our capacity will be part of the conversation for the board going into 2021. So no decision has been made. It is a continuous conversation with the board of directors to consider our capacity as well as how we model the process differently for judicial, given the judicial code of conduct and the canon. So more to come.
So I don't see any other questions in the chat, and I think Bobby Celeste has a request that I think is a great way, a note to end on, which is to have all of the endorsed candidates who are on the call give us a wave and identify yourselves. I know I see a number of you. I see a number of names up who are not off of their on their video. Jessica Miranda is on. Chris Schmenk is on. Who am I missing?
It's a mix.
Jeanette Strickland's on. Yeah.
And I think that's actually also a good, Bobby, thank you for shouting that out. Year after year after year, the candidates are coming back to us and wanting to be involved as members, as fundraisers, as advocates for more and more women to run. And so I just love that for our candidates, it's not just about their race. It's about building this movement and being part of it and paying back to women who come after them. Anything
That's everything
else?
I see.
Questions? We are at 5:22. I want to be mindful of everyone's time.
Sandra Kurt's on, making sure.
Yay, Sandra Kurt.
Yeah, making sure we gave a shout out to everyone. Bobby, I'm going through the list, but I just went, Meredith Lawson Rowe, Meredith. Oh,
I saw Shanette on there earlier.
Here. Thank you.
Thank you. What, and Nancy Larson, hello. Oh my word. So I apologize if we're missing Jessica, we have you. Anyone else that we're missing?
Carolyn Rice.
Oh,
Carolyn.
thank you. Carolyn, forgive, I'm going through the grid and trying to pick out the names. I'm sorry about that.
Is Myrita still on here?
Myrita, yeah.
Myrita, did you want to add any closing parts or anything to anything that I spoke of? Our fairly new board chair as of July.
Definitely new. I'm learning as we go, but I'm so inspired by our candidates that bravely put their head in the ring and were willing to step up and be considered for office. And we are so proud to support our Matriots candidates. And I also just am overwhelmed with the support of our members. We do two things. We raise money and we support candidates. And without our members, it's tough to do that. So thank you so much for helping more women get elected in the state of Ohio. I'm delighted that the numbers keep rising, and we have an aspirational goal to make not just incremental increases, but to have that quantum leap. And I know that it's coming.
Yep.
And also thank you to our staff who made this all happen, and to our volunteers that helped on the endorsement committee and helped connect with candidates in local races. Our focus in 2021 is to really get hyper local. We welcome the opportunity to endorse at the local level because that builds our pipeline. So we will be very active in our local communities as we expand. And I thank all of our queen bees. I know Emily Toby is one of our queen bees that's helping us in Cincinnati. And we have others that we look forward to in our other markets. So thank you so much.
Thank
Elissa,
you. Thank you, everyone.
Elissa, I have please, I'd like to shout out
Hi.
Mrs. Lazarus, the godmother of philanthropy, a founding matriarch.
Hey,
you,
Mary.
Amen.
One final idea. How about, I'll share this in the chat and I'll follow it up in the email. Mark your calendars now, December 9th. We're going to do our member year-end mingler. Unfortunately, it will be on Zoom, but the silver lining of that is we can do it across the state and we can do it in your living room. So here is the RSVP. We would love to have you all there, and please bring a friend. Thank you for spending time with us this afternoon. And Elissa, thank you so much for the deep dive.
Of course.
Thank you.
Happy to do it. Thank you.
Hi, Mary.
Thank
Hi,
you.
Mary.
Thank you.
Hi, Mary.
Great meeting. Hi, Ron and Louisa.
Hey, Mary, you know how much I love you.
Hi, thank you so much.
So great to see
Great
everybody.
gathering.
Isn't it?
Congratulations to everybody.
Absolutely. Happy Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
Stay
Good
well.
night, everybody.
Stay well.
Take
Yeah.
care.
Stay safe.